Welcome, everyone, to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Palo Alto, California. We are hosting the great, the wonderful Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin. And several of our non-religious or secular organizations are hosting Dan, including the San Francisco Bay Area Freedom from Religion Foundation and the Humanist community in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, and the atheist community of San Jose, and the humanist group at the Unitarian Church. So we have quite a group of hosts today. So welcome to Dan Barker. Yesterday, he spoke at the San Francisco Public Library about a wonderful book that he wrote, and that was spectacular. Lots of people made it to San Francisco yesterday. Both yesterday and today, the event is posted on Zoom and is being recorded in addition to being live. We have a packed room today, as we did yesterday in San Francisco. So Dan Barker was once upon a time, he was raised a Christian in Southern California, and he was a Christian minister until about age 34 when he saw the light and decided that he didn't believe it anymore. And one of the first things that happened after that was that he was on an Oprah Winfrey show with Ann Gaylor and Annie Laurie Gaylor, who had founded the Freedom from Religion Foundation before that. And here was Dan sort of coming out anew as a reformed minister, becoming an atheist. It was a beautiful thing to watch. We watched it the other night because it was so sweet. It was the first time they had ever met. And of course, then they later married and have been married for quite a few decades now. Anyway, Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, along with his wife, Annie Laurie Gaylor. Some of us every year go to the annual Freedom from Religion Foundation conventions that are held all over the country, and we always see them there, of course. So we welcome Dan Barker. He's well known not only for his books that he has written and his very good speaking skills, but also his music. He writes a lot of, he used to write Christian songs in the old days, and then he started writing non-religious songs, and some of those he will sing for us today, and we can sing along if we know them. So we would like to warmly welcome Dan Barker, co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Welcome back.
Do I need a mic or can you hear okay? Okay. Well, thank you, Judy, and thank you, Judy, for your hospitality and staying at their home the last few days. And it was fun yesterday, a good crowd, and I did a lot of talking yesterday. I used to be a minister, and ministers like to talk. Did you know the word reverend is a typo? The first letter used to be an N. But there's a piano here today, so why talk when there's a piano? Judy was right that I wrote Christian music. I wrote for Mana Music. I worked for Word Records. I produced albums and wrote songs for Manuel Bonilla, the leading Spanish-speaking Christian recording artist in the world. He's still alive, and we're still good friends. And we produced just a number of children's Spanish Christian albums, which is groundbreaking, and they're still selling. And in fact, the Christian music I wrote for Mana and for Word and all that, that's still selling. I'm still getting royalties today from way back in the 70s. For me, music is to live for. I think music is universal. Once the music starts, who cares what your beliefs are? I play in some big bands where there's some of the players that I would not want to live on the same street with them. I mean, just these horrible. But when the music starts, we look at each other, so if the countries of the world could start a band, we just forget about it all and just enjoy the music. Annie Laurie is home in Madison, Wisconsin, As Judy said, we are co-presidents, and she sends her greetings. They're shoveling snow there today, and she kind of wishes she was here as well. So why don't I just do a few songs, and maybe we'll talk a little bit in between, and then you might have some questions and or complaints, whatever. And I'll tell you a little bit about the foundation's activities. But there's a piano here, so let's try some tunes. Here's a song that I wrote like right after I left the ministry. Evangelism and missionary work is like sales. And before you can sell something to anybody, you have to convince them they need it, right? You can't just say, here, buy this. You need this. So that's what evangelism is. Before you can sell salvation, you first have to sell damnation. You are bad. You are wrong. You are corrupt. You're depraved. You're going to hell. You're going to burn. But we've got the answer for you. How much respect should we have for a doctor who runs around cutting people with a knife in order to sell them a Band-Aid? I mean, here they create the problem and then they solve the problem. Well, this is one of the first things I ever wrote after I left the ministry. So glad to be out of that salesman job. You can't win. You can't win with original sin. It doesn't even matter how intelligent or kind you may have been. It was all over before it began. You were doomed in the fall of man. You can't win. I was dead. I was dead before my life had begun. I was dead because of something my great, great, great grandparents had done. That's no fun. Adam and Eve didn't do any wrong. They were set up all along. They couldn't win. The kind of God who's so insecure that he needs to send me to hell. It's the kind of God who'd probably get a big kick out of damning all the Christians as well. You never could tell. It was all over before it began. I was doomed in the fall of man. You just can't win. You can't win. You can't win with original sin. Doesn't even matter how intelligent or how kind you may have been. You just can't win. Adam and Eve didn't do any wrong. They were set up by God all along. But as a skeptic, I must insist Adam and Eve didn't really exist, and neither does God for that matter. And until the day that old myth is shattered, you just can't win. Did you know the Catholic Church actually outlawed the tango? The tango was from the brothels of Argentina. It was sinful. You were going to go to hell if you dance the tango and other dances. So of course, what dance do people want to dance, right? The church says don't do it. Well, they want to do it. So I wrote a song in the style of the tango, kind of, to get back at the church. Beware of dogma. It has a bite. Beware of dogma. It wants a fight. Beware of dogma. It will ignite a holy war by itself. Beware of dogma. It'll trap your mind. Religious dogma. It'll make you blind. Beware of dogma. It's not designed to let you think for yourself. If we let it out in the universe, there will be no doubt. Everything is worse. Beware of dogma. Don't let it loose, that unchained dogma. It'll reproduce. Tie up your dogma. There's no excuse for ignorance anymore. Beware of dogma. Don't let it loose, that unchained dogma. It'll reproduce. Tie up your dogma. There's no excuse for ignorance anymore. Please clean up after your dogma. So I've been reading a lot about composers who were non-religious, composers and songwriters, and a whole bunch of them, especially in the Great American Songbook, the Gershwins and Cole Porter. Cole Porter was an outspoken atheist. He had to come out of two closets, actually. And Jerome Kern, Yip Harburg, who wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And many of them were pushing back against the censorship of religion in the church. And Irving Berlin, way back in the early 1920s, uh, the church was, when jazz was brand new, jazz music was like, the church was saying, jazz will send you to hell. That music it's not proper music. Don't play jazz. And he got really mad. He just built his music box theater in Manhattan. And so he wrote a song to push back against the censorship of the church going after jazz musicians. It's called Pack Up Your Sins and Go to the Devil in Hades. You know, Irving Berlin wrote White Christmas, right? He didn't celebrate Christmas. He even actually hated Christmas, but he loved money. That's so, and he also wrote God Bless America. God Bless America. He didn't believe in God. He wrote it for a character in a musical that weren't his views. And look at what the religious right has done with that, not knowing the guy who wrote God Bless America didn't even believe in God. So in 1922, he did the song, Pack Up Your Sins and Go to the Devil in Hades. And a woman was dressed in a red devil costume. And she came out on stage and she's dispatching these evil jazz musicians down to hell. Oh, I got a message from below, just from a man I used to know about a year or so ago before he departed. He is just as happy as can be. I'll tell you what he said to me. He said, if ever you get heavy hearted, pack up your sins and go to the devil in Hades. You'll meet the finest of gentlemen and the finest of ladies. They'd rather be down below than up above. Hades is full of thousands of Joneses and Browns, O'Hoolahans, Cohens, and Bradys. You'll hear a heavenly tune that went to the devil because those jazz bands, they started picking it, they put a lick in it, a crazy kick in it. They've got a couple of old reformers in heaven, making them go to bed at 11. Pack up your sins and go to the devil, and you'll never have to go to bed at all. If you care to dwell where the weather is hot, HELL is a wonderful spot. If you need a rest and you're all out of sorts, Hades is the best of the winter resorts. Paradise doesn't compare. All the nice people are there. They come there from everywhere just to revel with Mr. Devil. Nothing on his mind but a couple of horns. Satan is waiting with his jazz band, and his band came from Alabama with a melody hot. No one gives a damn if it's music or not. Satan's melody makes you want to dance forever, and you'll never have to go to bed at all. So that was Irving Berlin. Next time somebody sings God Bless America, tell them about that song because so many of those writers were, even not just non-religious, but openly free thinking. Yip Harburg, who wrote It's Only a Paper Moon, he wrote April in Paris and Finian's Rainbow, all of those great songs. And then, of course, he wrote the lyrics to. So there's one of the youngest songwriters from Tin Pan Alley was Charles Strauss, and he knew everybody. He knew Richard Rodgers. He didn't know Richard Rodgers was an outspoken atheist, and he had worked with all of them. And Charles Strauss, Charles Strauss wrote Annie, the musical Annie, The Sun Will Come Up Tomorrow. And Bye Bye Birdie, he wrote that music. So I read his biography, and in it he said he was an atheist. He worked with Butterfly McQueen, the actress in Gone with the Wind. He was a civil rights activist. And so he spoke at one of our conventions, and at dinner he said, I didn't know Rogers wasn't. We should have talked about all that stuff." And he said during dinner, he said, "You know what? I've never written a song that expresses my views about religion." He says, "I'm a musician, so if you'll send me some words, I'll set them to music." And I thought, whoa, this is the great Charles Strauss, And it took me a long time. It took me months to come up with some lyrics. I tried one and I threw it away. I tried another, and they just sounded weird till I hit on an idea. Cole Porter used to write these list songs. Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. I thought, let's do a list song. I sent him some words, and he emailed back and he said, "I can use this. This is good. We can make a song out of this." But he said, do you mind if I edit your lyrics a little bit?" And I said, "You're Charles Strauss. You're the professional." So he took my lyrics and he threw about 2/3 of them in the trash. It was way too wordy, and he cut it down to a simple little song. So I have a songwriting credit with Charles Strauss. It's called "Poor Little Me." And if you're a musician, listen to how he broke so many rules. If you're not a musician, you might not notice, which is good. You shouldn't have to notice. But he did things that I never would have thought you should do with music, and he put together this tune it's called "Poor Little Me." And there's a little nod to Yip Harburgen here. The multitudes mumble mythologies without end, but me, I have trouble with ologies that pretend to show what can't be shown, to know what can't be known. Lutherans have liturgies, Calvinists have creeds, Muslims have their minarets, Buddhists have their beads, Methodists have methods, holy truth to ascertain. But poor little me, I only have a brain. Bishops transubstantiate, Shintos ring their bells, Transcendentalists meditate while Wiccans weave their spells. Hindus chant the mantra when they can't relieve the pain. But poor little me, I only have a brain. So fearful of the Netherlands, believers band together, uncertain of the weatherman, the Sunnis wave a feather. They danced in circles to demand great spirits send some rain. But what do you do if you only have a brain? Quakers quake and Shakers shake, and Jews eat kosher food. Rastafarians wear their hair with pious gratitude. They all boast of miracles that no one can explain. But poor little me, I only have a brain. So fearful of the Netherlands, believers band together. Unhappy with the weatherman, the Zunies wave a feather. They dance in circles to demand great spirits send some rain. But what do you do if you only have a brain? Quakers quake, and Shakers shake, and Jews eat kosher food. Rastafarians wear their hair in pious gratitude. They all boast of miracles that no one can explain. But poor little me, I only have a brain. So that was Charles Strauss. He's gone now to that great nowhere. And he would have loved that, He was just so. And sometimes you're a non-believer, but you keep your head down. You don't let people know because you wonder what they think. We had a chapter in Alabama that was just starting out, and before they built their building, they were meeting in a living room, and one of the members they're kind of nervous. They're in Alabama. People even know that we're non-believers. And the door opened, and a woman walked in the front door, and he looked. "What are you doing here?" And she looked at him, "Well, what are you doing here?" They were neighbors. They shared a property line. They both assumed that they were Baptists or something. They never even talked about it. They just kind of kept it. They didn't have any bumper stickers. And they thought, wow, this has been more than 20 years. We could have had a blast talking for that. We didn't even know. We just assumed. So how do you know? It's not like we have these symbols or that, unless you wear one of those atheist hats or something. But um, and then others are keep quiet. I don't know about Oscar Hammerstein, who worked with Richard Rogers. He was certainly non-religious, but he never said anything about it. He didn't get married in religion, and he didn't have a religious funeral, so he probably was a non-believer, but we don't know. Anyway, I love reading those stories, the backstories of how some of these songs were written. And let me just do a couple. Here's one of my favorite Gershwin tunes here. You can tell I play jazz, just make it up as it happened. So that's how you can go to like Our Love Is Here to Stay. That was a song that when after George died at age 39, his brother Ira found it in the drawer. There were no words to it. So Ira put words to it later, and that was basically the last song that George Gershwin wrote. And those two brothers were certainly non-religious. It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. So they were irreverent. They didn't have any religious ceremonies when they got married, or not either. But so did you want to sing some tunes, Judy, or shall we do that? I mean the group. Uh, you didn't put the lyrics up, right?
Well,
Oh, you can't see them.
can't be seen, so
Uh,
but people can sing along what they know.
oh, well, I'll hold that then for later. Let me let me do another one of the very first songs I wrote after leaving the ministry after all those years, because I really was a deep believer. Jesus was my friend. I prayed to him. I got goosebumps. I saw what I thought were miracles. I was the evangelical type. I prayed for people, and sometimes it looked like they were healed, and I thought, wow, who could deny the power of God? And after I left, it took about a year. There was like a big kind of hole, because after a lifetime of doing something and you stop doing it, it's these habits. And I finally had to let go of them. And you can read my story in the book Godless if you want to read the story with all the reasons, the philosophical reasons and the biblical reasons and everything else. And then what happened too with all my friends and family. But this was a really raw song that, like, just a few months later, it's called Blood Brothers. When I was 4 years old, I had a little friend named Joshua. Whenever I was alone, he would come over to play. Cookies, cartoons, and punch. He liked all the same things that I liked. Cheerios and milk for lunch. Kitty cats, balloons, and kites. We were blood brothers, pals forever. He was my very best friend. Nobody else could see him, but he was real to me. Sometimes when I was sad, I would send Joshua a letter. He never wrote me back, but he'd always come right over to play. I'd never been to his house, but I knew exactly where he lived. His daddy was really nice to let us have such fun every day. We were blood brothers, pals forever, as close as we could be. Nobody else could see him, but he was real to me. When I was 5 years old, I just got so busy with schoolwork, many new friends to get to know. Joshua moved away. Sometimes I missed him so. We had had such great times together, but I know he had to go. It works out much better that way. We were blood brothers, pals forever, as close as we could be. Nobody else could see him, but he was real to me. Now that some years have gone, I can look back and smile at my childhood, at the times when it hurt to grow up, like when Joshua moved away. So I sent my letter to everybody I could think of after I left. I stopped believing, to co-missionaries, co-ministers, the Christian publishing companies, relatives, and friends. Just a one-page letter. And I got all sorts of reactions you can imagine. Everything from surprisingly hateful responses from people I thought were my friends. I guess they weren't friends or they wouldn't have acted like that, right? And what kind of friendship is it really that's contingent on something external? You got to belong in the same club as me, then you're my friend, right? So I guess I never really lost those friends. However, I got some surprisingly nice responses from Christian friends, and we're still friends today. We realized we actually like each other as people, not conditional to whether and maybe there's some of you have the same experience. There's people that you disagree with about a lot of things, but they're your friends, right? Your family members. So uh, my mom and dad got the letter. They were shocked. Mom took a bus from Arizona to California to say what happened to her preacher son, and we talked. She was a Sunday school teacher, and I don't remember much of this. We talked late into the night, and uh, she said I told her some things like, "Look at what the Bible says. You're teaching this book to these children. Look what this book says. Do you really want to be teaching this to children?" She went home, and a few months later, she said, "You know what? Danny's right. He's right." And so she said she stopped going to church. She stopped believing. It took my dad about a year, and he finally threw in the towel. My brother uh, Daryl was pretty quick. He said, "Oh yeah, yeah. Once somebody else articulates it, sometimes people say, well, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. Yeah, that's right." But he never wanted to say it. So Daryl said, "Yeah, I'm a humanist now. That's great." Of course, Daryl was always kind of a lousy Christian to begin with. I mean, he was. Daryl always said, and I was kind of embarrassed. He said his whole attitude toward Christianity was, "How much sin can I commit and still get into heaven?" I mean, that was. Uh, but our brother Tom remains a born again Christian, a very conservative, a really great guy. I just saw him this last Wednesday. We went out to eat, and we talk about everything except religion. Because why talk about stuff in your family that tears you apart? Why not concentrate on the things that the memories and the love and the family and the laughter and all that stuff? So we get along well. However, you know that 85% of evangelicals voted for Trump. My brother was one of the 15% who didn't. So we have that to talk about. That's pretty cool. And he wondered what the heck happened to his family. We were all, my dad was a preacher. My mom was, and so we call Tom the white sheep of the family. And so anyway, my mom said, "You know what? After a few months, it's so great being an atheist and not having to believe. You know what? I don't have to hate anymore. I don't have to choose who's in and who do we like and who don't we. What group of people? What about gays? What about this? What about feminine? I can just be a human being." And she was so happy about that. And then Dad a little bit later, Dad had been seminary trained, so it took him about a year to finally change his mind. And they were happy atheists for the rest of their life. But I wrote a song for Mom. My mother loved country music. She really loved it, and I love country music for one or two tunes. I mean, it's not my thing. I'm a jazz player, and if it's done well, I think it's great. But she loved it, so I wrote a song for her, and she was. This is hard to say. She was sick in the hospital, in and out. I said, "Mom, I got a surprise for you. I'm going to write a song for you in her style with basically kind of her words." And I should have just taken the guitar to her room and played, but instead I went to the studio. I went in and I produced it as a good recording with the piano and all that. And I was getting on the plane to take it to her, but I was too late. So she never heard the song. But I'll play it for you today. It's called This is really in her memory, and it's basically how she used to talk. It's called None of the Above. Everybody tries to tell me I need to choose a God to love, but after looking them all over, I'll take none of the above. I'm happy in the natural world, like a hand fits in a glove. Only sinners need a savior. I'll take none of the above. Why talk to me of heaven? What makes you think I want to go when it's right here in the real world where the milk flow? You preachers and messiahs, what were you thinking of? Don't need to fix what isn't broken. I'll take none of the above. Why talk to me of heaven? What makes you think I want to go when it's right here in the real world where the milk and honey flow? You preachers and messiahs, what were you thinking of? Don't need to fix what isn't broken. I'll take none of the above. So at the end of the year, our legal director, Patrick Elliott, who leads our team we have 10 full-time attorneys at FFRF, plus a legal staff, and there's some legal fellows that are on 2-year fellowships, and often interns. So we have quite a staff there of legal meetings are fun, and they're all busy and they're all working. He told us in 2025, we sent out 600 letters of complaint around the country. We get like thousands of intake, and we can't act on all of them. But our legal staff sent out 600 letters. Most of them were in schools, violations of state church separation in the classrooms and all sorts of things in the schools, but others too, public religious symbols on public property, public money going to private religion, and so on. Um, and out of those 600 letters, 200 of them resulted in a victory, a direct victory. We sent the letter of complaint, they got it, they decided, yep, this is wrong, and they stopped it. For example, in just South Carolina, and it doesn't maybe seem like a big deal. It's not like a big flashy lawsuit where you go up to the court. This teacher in an elementary school in South Carolina during December had put up the whole door of her classroom, the manger scene and the Star of Bethlehem, and for unto us a Savior is born. And a family complained, students in the school who were non-religious, they didn't want to be identified. But you can imagine, you want to complain, but you don't want anyone knowing you're the family that's complaining about Jesus. So they write to us. And our team gets letters out really quick. And as soon as the school there got the letter, the principal had it taken down. So this is not right. This is a public school. And those people can put it in their homes and in their churches, but the public schools are for all of us. Nobody should feel second class or uncomfortable because of their religious views. So, uh, and it's always some way I get to report what victories, and you can read them in our newspaper, Free Thought Today. Every month we report those victories from legal letters. And often, sometimes they'll thank us. Sometimes they'll say, oh, we didn't know this was wrong. Thank you for letting us know. And why wouldn't they know that? When somebody takes a job as a public servant, shouldn't they at least be informed about the Constitution? You can't do this. But anyway, but often they will do it reluctantly, and they have to save face in their town. And sometimes there was a school in Ohio that had a picture of Jesus on the wall next to all these other historical people in a high school. And the families complained, and the principal said, "No, that's Jesus is historical, and he's just as important to our country as anyone else." And he said that picture's not coming down without a court order. So, and it did come down. We went to court, and the school ended up paying, I don't know, $300,000, or their insurance company, ended up paying it. And so that picture did come down, and the principal was able to save face by saying, "I didn't want it to come down, but the finances and the court told me to." So he could still be and we don't care as long as they do the right thing. We don't care about that. So there are just hundreds and hundreds of stories. We also take lawsuits. We've taken dozens of actual lawsuits, mostly in federal court, sometimes in state court. Here in California, Pismo Beach, they had a chaplain, and so we sued and they didn't want to get rid of a paid chaplain in Pismo Beach, and we took it in state court and won it there. So it depends. There's a lot of strategy that goes into how you sue, how you complain. But I like the letters. I think the letters are great. And our attorneys have got it all. They've got the templates ready. Sometimes it's just a matter of changing the name and filling in the blanks. They have all the legal precedent, and our letters do not threaten legal action. We don't do that. We just inform them. We're just, and but their legal counsel, if they're half smart, they will know they're liable. I mean, they're vulnerable. They could get sued, and they know from looking at us that we do sue. So and sometimes we have to actually go to sue in an area so that they know we're mean business. Georgia, they used to ignore our letters forever in Georgia. Apparently in Georgia, all the school districts have the same legal counsel. So they would just tell them, just ignore them. They're just complaining. So we went to court in one of those cases and we won. Now they can't ignore us because they know there's teeth. It's not just some angry parent complaining. It's actual legal. So you probably heard about Oklahoma, the superintendent of public instruction, Ryan Walters, who's gone now. We've been calling for his resignation for a long time, and he finally took our advice. Um, he was bringing Bibles into the school and spending money, and he was from public money he raised. I don't know how much money to buy the Trump Bibles, so that they could put them in the schools, and so we've sent letters to Oklahoma, just like the letters I was telling you about. We sent them to a school. Some school in Oklahoma got our letter and decided, you know what, they're right. So they stopped. They followed the law. But Ryan Walters, the superintendent of public instruction there, said, "You're interfering separate," and that's mostly through legal education. We have our deputy legal director does legal education, and attorneys have to take CLE. You know what that is? Continuing education to keep up. Well, our attorneys do that, but now our attorneys are giving CLEs. So other attorneys come to learn about constitutional law from our staff because they really know. They're probably the leading, along with Americans United and American Humanists. There's other groups too that do the same thing. And for the most of the time, we cooperate with the other groups. Often we will take joint lawsuits with the ACLU. In Texas and Louisiana right now, we're part of a coalition lawsuit, ACLU, Americans United, and others. And that looks really good because it's not just a couple atheists that are mad at what's happening. There's a rabbi, there's a Unitarian minister who's joined. There are Christian families who are liberal. They join our lawsuits as well, and Catholics. So when we get to the court, we can say, look at this broad cross-section of people who object to mixing religion and government. Like Madison said, when you mix religion and government, they both get dirty. They're best maintained in greater purity, he said, when they are separate. And a lot of religious people agree with that. It's just the extremists who are uncomfortable. So often we're marching in the same parade with these liberal Christians. And you know about Amanda Tyler and her group, Christians Against Christian Nationalism, the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. They agree with us, and they will join our lawsuits because they know what's important. They know they don't want the government interfering with their religion either. So, but our second purpose is to educate the public about the views of non-theists. And we don't care. At FFRF, most of our members call themselves atheists, but some prefer agnostic. Some prefer skeptic or secular humanist. It doesn't really matter. What we say is we don't care what we call ourselves. We all disbelieve in the same God, so why does that matter? Um, and we even have some religious people join our group. They disagree with the philosophy of non-belief, but they support the work for keeping state and religion separate. So the educational part of our mission involves a newspaper and a TV show, and we have YouTube show. We had a show that was Free Thought Matters viewed here in this area? It was for a while. For 7 years, we had a broadcast show on TV around the country called Free Thought Matters, and we've stopped that now. We have now created a streaming app because a lot of people are getting their information not just from watching regular TV, but they're on their phones and that. So we have a streaming app. We just launched it like a month ago. It's called Freethought TV. And if you have a smart TV or any of that, like that's Roku or Samsung and a whole bunch of those platforms, we're still waiting for Apple. Apple is really slow at getting us on, so we still can't see it on the iPhone, but it's going to happen. And it's a whole bunch of programs and interviews and music and free thought material that you can and it's free. You can just download the app on your phone or your smart TV and look at a lot of, including those Free Thought Matters interviews we did with scientists and lawyers and philosophers and activists and authors and all that, to show that it's not just the religious who have access to all this stuff. We do too. So, and we're going to keep it fresh. I'm actually going to do a series, maybe 10 or 12 live concerts at our Free Thought Hall. We have a brand new Steinway grand piano at our building, which is beautiful. A series concentrating on a different songwriter, like I did today. I'm going to do one whole show about the Gershwins, one whole show about Jerome Kern, one whole show about Yip Harburg, and so on, which is educational, and play some of the tunes and explain their views, because a lot of people don't know that. When you hear these songs, a lot of Christians, when they fall in love and get married, they're singing these songs by Cole Porter, and they don't realize Cole Porter the love songs that they're singing weren't meaning the same thing in his mind as they were in their mind, but what a great talent he was. So I'll do a whole show on Cole Porter, and those will be streamed live, and we can announce to anybody on that platform if you want to tune in and watch it with a live audience, that show. So how are we doing for time? Are we still? Sure, let me get some water here. Yeah.
So if there is a Secretary of State for, if there is a, oh. Okay, that makes me look sharp. If there is a press secretary and there's a Secretary of State who are on the job and they are wearing a cross while they're doing that, is that considered free speech, or is that proselytizing, or is that something else?
So that happens a lot, and if it's during their actual job and they're facing with the public, then we complain about it. I don't know if we could win a lawsuit over that, but at least we can complain, and you can complain. You can say, "Wait a minute, you're a public official and you're representing me, and you're forcing your religion on me." If the cross happens to be in their office by the desk or something where they're not public facing, then that's more like free speech, right? But if they're doing it in an event, especially if they do something like prayer or that, and we complain.
This is the real thing. You see it on the news,
Yeah.
and there they are, without naming them, but the press secretary for Donald J.
Yeah.
Trump and the Attorney General with their cross. That's very visible sometimes. Silver cross on the black background.
Yeah.
You can definitely.
Well, they're obviously wanting to do that because they're Christian nationalists.
Well,
is
yeah,
what they are.
that's the thing.
And Christian nationalists assume they have the right and the freedom to impose, because this, according to them, this is a Christian nation, and everyone else is welcome. We'll tolerate you, but we Christians are the true Americans, right? And that's un-American. So we would complain, and we do complain. In many of those cases, just registering a complaint is all we can do. With the IRS, it's the same way. If you see a pastor who's politicking from the pulpit, they're not supposed to do that. It's illegal under the Johnson Amendment. So we often, and even people like you will send a letter to the IRS. Guess what I saw? They're doing. So the IRS registers it, but they don't tell us. They don't respond. They don't even tell us that they got the complaint. But occasionally we do hear that, like Robert Jeffries, the big Baptist church in Dallas, Texas, he invited Vice President Pence in on a Sunday morning to campaign for Trump,
Wow.
and it was televised, and we complained about it. And the IRS must have contacted him because he started complaining about us. And he was publicly saying, guess what? The Freedom from Religion Foundation sicked the IRS on me. So it can work. So it can happen. But yeah, but if nothing else, complain. And sometimes it pays to complain. And the public officials need to know. They're representatives, right? They need to represent what we think. So at least let them know.
So we would be able to write to those two people, for example. I don't know that we could.
Well, yeah, you can contact the
If you could
department.
contact
Yeah. Or write to us, and our people.
Write to you, and you would.
And we also, we have two groups. We have a 501c3, which is a regular nonprofit, educational, like this congregation here is a C3. Religions are. There's also a C4 group, which is advocacy, where we can actually do some lobbying and some endorsements. So, and we have to keep the two kind of separate. But like, if you wrote a check to this congregation, you could write it off on your taxes. But if you write a check to a politician, you can't, right? So it's the same thing. So you can contact us, and then either the C3 staff or the C4 staff can figure out how to get a note or something to them. But a lot of times we complain to the wind, but at least we're complaining.
It's
and
on the record.
It's
right?
on the record,
It's
yeah.
part of
Yeah.
history.
Here's a question, okay.
What came first, music for you, or the inclination to religion or non-religion? Back in when you were starting, because your music is just
Huh.
wonderful. Where was that in your
So I
story?
started off as a kind of a church pianist, and for many, many years I was very enthusiastic and very bad. I was just, I just loved it. I just loved it so much, and I learned a lot in the recording studios and playing with bands and things. Um, but to me, it was all just part of the same thing: worshiping God through music, right? And I played in Southern gospel quartets, if you remember what those were like. The four men singing, that was fun. And I played, and then a lot in Mexico, and then in Southern California, the Hispanic community, all these churches around there, we did a whole lot of work. In fact, when I was 15, Manuel Bonilla came up to Southern California. He's a big recording artist in the Christian Spanish-speaking world, and he didn't speak English, and I had met him, so we became friends. So I became his sort of studio producer arranger for a while, and I recorded my first time in the studio was a little song. You know the song "He Touched Me"? Do any of you remember that song? He did a version in Spanish, and I arranged the marimbas and the guitars and the singers, and it was mono back then. It was just like a little studio. That song became a big hit in the Spanish-speaking world, and here I was listening to the Spanish radio in Southern California, hearing my piano playing and all that. It was quite, and I thought it was ministry. I thought it was God breathed. It was all directed toward. And I was kind of dumb. I didn't even charge for anything. I just did it all for Jesus. But that reminds me of a question. Somebody once asked Ira Gershwin, what comes first, the music or the words? And Ira said, the contract. And there's some real truth to that, because most of the songs they wrote were for a purpose. If you're writing for Broadway, you don't just say, hey, I got a song, stick my song on your show. You're writing for the show. And once you have agreed what you're writing for, and a lot of the songs you hear were written for shows. Once in a while, they might write a standalone song, like "The Man I Love" was one of those that Gershwin wrote. Da 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 da, the man I love, which is too long of a story to tell, but that became the theme in Rhapsody in Blue. Da 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 da, because he was experimenting with putting a minor seventh, dominant seventh on a static tonic chord, which was really radical then. And so anyway, he did write a song that they tried to find a musical for, but most of the time, and Cole Porter would say the same thing, Charles Strauss, we're writing for this scene, especially Sondheim. Sondheim's songs were so integrated into, and he was an atheist too, integrated into the musical that some of his songs don't work outside of the musical, but they work beautifully inside of it. So I digressed a little bit, but yeah, I love talking about music. Yeah, yeah. All of the FFRF has 3 albums, which was 4 CDs, and they're now available like Spotify and that. Look up in the so that's all there, and then a lot of it's on YouTube, and it'll be on the. We're also going to put them up on the Freethought TV app too, and we have to get our graphic person to because it's just music, so we got to get something that looks good with it too. I also have some piano solo albums. They're called Night at Nakoma. Those are on Spotify too. It's like this piano solo stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is, I look around the room, look at the age. Question is, how are we reaching younger people, both for the separation of state and religion, as well as understanding about religion in general,
Yeah.
and how successful we've been? I mean, FFR.
Well, so there's a number of answers to that question. A simple one is that 2 of my grandsons who are in their 20s, I bought them a membership to FFRF. They're young, they're poor, they don't have the time, and someday when they get into their 40s, they're going to start caring like this audience, right? Younger people usually don't have the discretion, and they certainly can't fly to a convention, plane ticket and hotel rooms. And so most of our conventions are, pretty great. But we offer scholarships to young people. We have 5 scholarships every year: high school, ongoing college, law school, grad school. We have these essay contests where, in a sense, we are giving them money to encourage them to write. And some of if you read our paper, you can read a lot of their essays they write. It's just pretty amazing. The winner last year was this Native American girl from the Ponca tribe who just wrote this great piece. So at this point, it's kind of one way. They,
Wondering, like universities and that kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
and bringing.
So you're talking about the Secular Student Alliance, probably, and that group is wonderful, and we partner with them. Secular Student Alliance puts secular groups on campuses, even high schools. There's a few high schools. It's tough though because once the leadership graduates, they got to keep the thing going. But if you care about supporting young people, the Secular Student Alliance is secularstudent.org. It's really good. Kevin Bowling is their director right now. By the way, his house burned down in the Palisades fire, and they're just rebuilding that. And at our conventions, there's usually 4 or 5 or 6 younger people there. But so we're trying to reach. And the average age, we did a survey last year. The average age of FFRF members is 66.6. That just happened. That's just what it happened to be. More than a third are retired, and you can kind of see why at that age, and you have the discretion and the time and resources and that. So we'd like that number to drop. But what happens is that age has been sort of constant, even since the 70s and 80s and 90s. We've sort of had that age, which means the older ones are dying up, but the younger ones, we're growing into it. So we're going to keep the group's going to keep growing, but it won't be until you get in your 40s or so that you're going to realize I need to join groups like this and support groups like this. When you're in your 20s, I need help. I have school loans to pay off. I'm not going to spend money sending it somewhere. So yeah.
Dan?
What?
Yeah. When someone doesn't have the light, you have to repeat what they say.
Oh,
Okay?
all right.
Sorry, I was just saying that your ads on MSNBC
Yeah.
with Ron Reagan is first time I heard about it and sort of understood. So thank you for that.
Yeah, ads on MSNBC and other networks as well. So Comedy Central, we've had him on there, and he was great, And we gave him some copy to read for the 30-second ad, and it came out. He kept reading it. It came out to 25, 26 seconds, and he said, "Well, I got 30 seconds. What do I do?" So he just ad-libbed at the end and said, "Ron Reagan, unabashed atheist, not afraid of burning in hell." We didn't write that for him. He wrote it himself. Yeah, it is the best part. Because ours was kind of basic and dry, but then he stuck that in there like, wow. And so when our lobbyists are in DC or talking to members of Congress, they'll say, "Oh, the Ron Reagan group. Yeah, we know that. We know who you are." They don't often remember the name, but And by the way, Ron's coming to our convention this October in Milwaukee. So if you want to come and meet him, he'll be there giving a talk. Yeah.
I'm wondering how you feel about there are other kind of agnostic song. Let the Mystery Be is a famous one. How you
Yeah.
feel about that? And then also Steve Martin's work as well, his bluegrass work.
Yeah. He had that song, Atheists Don't Got No Songs. You ever heard
Yeah,
that one?
which is
Which is,
self negating.
yeah, well, yeah.
Here we go.
And besides that, you just heard some atheist songs. So, and then, of course, Tom Lehrer. Oh, we were going to do Vatican Rag, weren't we? Did somebody ask for Vatican Rag? Oh, that'll be a way to, I'll end the show. I'll end with that. And
That would be great.
yeah. Um, and sometimes there's just a lot of songs that are just not anti-religious, but they're just secular, natural songs. So, of course, John Lennon's Imagine is always a.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know when it was, maybe a year or two ago, there was a story about an elementary school teacher. It's kind of the opposite of the stories you're telling, where had something on the wall basically saying, in this classroom, we welcome everybody. And the school was not happy about that. They even threatened to fire, but I don't know how it turned out. Do you know that story or no?
No.
Okay, too bad.
So, what's wrong with saying we welcome everybody? I guess probably because of trans and all that,
I think that might have been. Yeah,
Yeah,
it might have been the LGBTQ stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Oh.
Hello. So I heard you talking about educating the public and also like filing complaints. And I wonder, since you have a legal team and you have experience with this, if I can ask if you have any advice or thoughts on how in the public sector to either advance education or file complaints about the criminal activity of the Roman Catholic Church. And just as an example, one can read about, for instance, criminal investigations of the Roman Catholic Church state by the attorney generals that have conducted them. One can read about states that the attorney general has actually been in some way influenced to not conduct such an investigation. One can read about criminal activity internationally. One can read about criminal activity, for instance, in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. And yet I feel like the educational piece is missing, that like in the zeitgeist, this is just not, maybe because it's such a sensitive topic. So any thoughts you would have on either bringing it up or filing complaints would be so helpful.
Yeah, what a horrible situation. And these children, it's usually children, but there's a lot of sexual abuse, financial abuse as well going on. And some states like Pennsylvania have been really good. They're actually proactively going after. Other states are kind of looking the other way. So our group takes legal action against the government. So we don't sue individuals. We wouldn't sue a church. We couldn't do any of that. But we can put pressure, like in Wisconsin, we're putting pressure on our own attorney general because there's some horrible cases out of Green Bay.
I'm from Wisconsin, and I
Okay.
know the Attorney General didn't follow up so
No, I
far.
know. He said he would, but
Right.
there's a group there in Milwaukee, the SNAP group. What do they call it? Anyway, they're trying to put pressure on him too. Originally, he said, yeah, but
Mhm.
so in that case, of course, we can contact him in his office and put pressure on them. And you would think that their office would feel some obligation to the public for what's happening. I mean, these are crimes. These are, there's deaths involved in this from this loving organization called the church. But yeah, so sometimes we get complaints from people who think we could help them in their divorce case or something because the religions. But we can't really do that. We only use the First Amendment to sue governments at whatever level. But if the government seems complicit with the church in some way, then there we could make, and we maybe could take a lawsuit in a case where maybe the government is failing to do its job. I'm not a lawyer, but there's something called writ of mandamus where you can You can take a case to force the government to do the job they're supposed to do, right? Instead of stopping them from doing something, you can sue to go ahead and finish doing your job. So that's a possibility as well. But if nothing else, complain from people complaining. They have to listen and they have to register and log any complaints they get in their office. So we also have every month in our newspaper, we have a 2-page spread. Some of you've seen it, called Black Collar Crimes. And since the late 80s, we've been running that. We've been running it consistently. Many of it is sexual abuse, but any crimes that clergy commit. A lot of it's financial. Our editor can't put them all in each month. There's just so many of them. So we became kind of a clearinghouse for who collects all those things. Some of our readers love that page and others hate that page. Why are you wasting all this time reporting on the black collar crime? So maybe some of you feel different ways about it. Bill tries to keep track of all that he can. He reports the arrests, he reports sentencings, he reports other legal developments, and a lot of it has to do with dioceses having to pay money for settlements for a lot of these cases.
First thing I read in your newsletter.
Oh, you read it? Oh, he says it's the first thing he reads in the newsletter. Well, that's good to know. It's a lot of work, and we have to be careful. And we have to be careful because if we print something wrong, we could be. In fact, we did have a mistake a few years ago. We said there was this scumbag pastor and his wife, and they were abusing children and stealing money, and they were convicted. But in the story in I think it was Seattle paper, said that she confessed. The husband confessed, but she got mad. I did not confess. So we had to show the original clipping that we were passing on, because she could sue us. I mean, if we say something wrong, we get it wrong. So our editor is very careful about making sure that everything is very well sourced and documented for legal reasons.
Okay, this is just a remark from an animation fanatic that from your song Joshua, if the movie The Imaginaries becomes available by Studio Ponok in Japan, you want to see it.
The Imaginaries, huh? Okay.
Hi, I'd like to get back to the Johnson Amendment for just a moment. Is that I understand that there's a movement with the Republican Congress people to actually try and get rid of the Johnson Amendment. And I'm wondering if you could comment on, which we all know would be just a disaster. Could you comment on whether that's even a possibility? And if so, what the foundation is doing to gather troops? I know that we can always write our Congress people, but here in this room, I'm guessing that our Congress people pretty much already agree with us. So, what else can we do?
Well, your member of Congress can put pressure on the sponsors of the bill or to pressure people to vote against it. Yeah, there is a move to get rid of the Johnson Amendment prohibits churches from doing political and endorsement. So a pastor can't get up and say vote for so and so or don't vote. They can't do that legally. If they do that legally, they're violating the bargain they struck with the government to get this tax exemption. You're tax exempt as long as you don't. So the penalty would be they'd lose their tax exemption, and that has happened. Occasionally, that has happened where the IRS goes after them. It's an IRS thing, which means that if you wrote a check to that church, it would no longer be tax deductible. So, and that's damaging to nonprofits to not have that tax exemption. But you're right, it's not just in Congress. There's a number of, they call themselves patriot pastors, who are openly defying it because they want to get arrested or they want to go to court. They want to challenge the law, and they hope that if we violate it and we're the injured parties here, we can take it to the Supreme Court, and this Supreme Court will vote with us, right? So there is a move to that. Some of them do that. And the IRS recently, a few months ago, actually announced that they were refusing to prosecute a few churches, and they wrote a decision on it, and the Supreme Court basically held that. I forget all the details. Our legal staff can tell you the details. But apparently, and so with that little bit of a crack in the Johnson Amendment, a whole bunch of churches are saying, we can do this now. We're free to do this. If you hear about a church or a pastor or a religious organization doing that, complain either to the IRS or to us, and we can complain to the IRS as well. But basically what that would do is it would turn churches into basically political PACs. They could just send as much money, any money they want to this dark hole. It would be like, who would know, right? And then they could get up and endorse, and they could put out on their marquees on the lawn. They could do all this stuff without any repercussions. So it is dangerous. You're right. It's a big problem. And our lobbyists and our advocacy staff are in touch with members of Congress who are trying to stop something like that. So, and by the way, you can sign up at our C4. It's called FFRF Action Fund. It's free. You don't even have to be a member. You can just sign up as an advocate. And what they'll do is they'll send you. Did you know that there's a bill in your town, or there's a bill in your county, or that? Did you know that even in school boards, they're even tracking school boards, and so you can take action, and they will give you, suggested wording. If you just want to send it, or you can write. It's better if you write your own, complaint. So go to FFRF Action. I think it's FFRF Action, and just sign up. And there's no cost, and you can be one of the advocates that's watching. And it's amazing how we have a small legal advocacy staff, but they have this software that's watching the whole country. And imagine school boards. There's thousands of school boards in the country. At the federal level, you can watch that pretty easily. The state level's harder, but at the school board level, there's that. And who knows what's going on? Are they praying there? Are they, what are they doing? So they're actually keeping track of that. And if your school board is doing something you don't know about, they'll send an email to you say you should know about this. So, yeah. By the way, when Trump was first elected in 2016, one of the first things he did that he announced that he was going to do was sign an executive order to overturn the Johnson Amendment. And he did. They made a big, and then the Rose Garden, they had this big, all these evangelicals, and he signed this. We knew he was going to do it, and we had the brief all ready to go. And the day that he signed it, we filed a lawsuit challenging that. And basically, the government told us that it didn't have, that executive order has no teeth. It doesn't overturn anything. The law is still the law. It was basically a symbolic signal. And they agreed with us that it was wrong for him to do that. So we basically settled the lawsuit. But you didn't hear a lot of news about that. You hear the news when he signs it. Yeah, a lot of churches still think, well, Trump signed away that thing. But it was just a gimmick, really. But we had to go to court to at least get the government to agree that no, the Johnson Amendment is not overturned. Nothing has changed. Some of those executive orders are just ink on paper. They're not really doing anything.
I have a question. Right here has FFRF, that's called, has it addressed? I don't know what it's called, the prayer breakfast that the president's office hosts. Have you guys addressed that?
Yep.
And what is this
Yeah,
still
we're
going
watching
on,
that.
or?
Yes, we are. And Mark Dan, he's a lobbyist. He has another title, but he's our lobbyist in DC. They have been successful in convincing a lot of the members of Congress, because the prayer breakfast is private. It's not a government thing, but it looks governmental. And even some senators and members of Congress will put out the prayer as if it were some governmental thing. And nobody has to go to it, but a lot of them went to it because it's a place to connect and schmooze and meet. And they even had the atheist president of Turkey or something came into it. I mean, it was just weird. It's just a weird thing that's happening there. All this public-facing prayer, but there's all this backroom stuff. And to get invited to the prayer breakfast in D.C. is a big thing. So this last year, a whole bunch of members of Congress, mostly Democrats, decided we're not going. We're not showing up. So there have been some boycotts as a result of lobbying to not go to the thing, because if you're going to it, you're supporting this kind of, they think it's beautiful, but it's kind of a sleazy thing that is happening there in government. Of course, with the current administration, they brought it right into the visitor center of the White House. Instead of having it at a hotel somewhere, they want it to look like a big deal. So also, every year there's a National Day of Prayer that Congress has mandated that the president should declare a national proclamation day of prayer every year. So there's a group of members of Congress called the Congressional Freethought Caucus now, and Jared Huffman, who's the second district. Is it still the second district? What happened with Prop 50? Did they change numbers, or did they? Well, anyway, he founded it with Jamie Raskin of Maryland. They co-founded the Congressional Freethought Caucus, and I know they have about 25 members or maybe more now. You can look that up online. And they are actively trying to contact other members of Congress to inform them about some of these things that are going on. So the National Day of Prayer, Jamie Raskin and Jeremy and some of the others, they have a National Day of Reason that same week. And so a lot of our groups, FFRF and the American Humanists and other groups, we put it on. We invite the speakers, and then we get to go into a congressional office and have this National Day of Reason. And you can watch it. It's streamed. So this year we'll be doing the same thing. That would be, is it usually the first Thursday in May? Something like that. Sometimes in that week, to fight back against the National Day of Prayer. And it's a small group right now, and the caucus is relatively small, but they're not all atheists and agnostics. In fact, only one of them is openly non-believer, but we know a few others who are. They have to kind of have to keep your head down if you're an atheist in Congress and you want votes. It hasn't hurt Jared Huffman. Jared Huffman came out a few years ago as openly non-theistic member of Congress, and people were wondering how that would affect his next election. He did better in the next election, openly better, and he proved the fact that you can be open about this. And his voters said, "We don't care about that. We care about your policies. We care about what you're voting. We don't care if you're a believer or not. That's not important to us." So that was a good example. And there are more and more brave members running for public office at all sorts of levels, even at school board levels, who are not afraid to come out. So the prayer breakfast and the National Day of Prayer are two things that we sued over the National Day of Prayer, by the way, years ago, and we won in federal court. The judge declared the National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional. We took it to the appeals court, and the appeals court said, "Well, you're not really injured. You can just look the other way, And we had a good victory. And so by saying that we were not injured, they didn't overrule our decision on the merits. They overruled it on standing, which means maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but you don't have the right to sue, is what they said, because you're not injured anyway. It doesn't hurt you, what the president does. And so in fact, the few cases that we do lose are most often lost on standing rather than merits. So right now there's a federal court decision declaring National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional. But since there's no standing to get at it, and one of our attorneys asked, well, I forget who they asked. They asked either one of the judges or somebody, who would have the right to sue over that? The answer was the president would have the right to sue. Because Congress is telling the president to proclaim this day. And if the president doesn't like that, the president can say, I don't want to. So what about the rest of us?
Yeah, so you just are talking about something I want to ask about, and I still have a question. I remember some years ago, apparently there were only two congressmen who were admitted that they were atheist or agnostic, Pete Stark in the East Bay and somebody in Princeton. I didn't know about Jared Huffman. Do you know roughly how many congresspeople or senators at this time admit to being atheist or agnostic?
Well, no, but at that last reason reception, Jared Huffman told us he knows there are others, but they're keeping their mouths shut.
Yeah.
And we quote unquote know our own representative in Wisconsin, Mark Pocan. He came and spoke at one of our conventions.
Yeah.
And he calls himself non-religious. He didn't use the word atheist, but he's been in our office, and so he's a non-religious member of Congress, but he shouldn't be afraid. In Madison, Wisconsin, more than 50% of that county is non-religious. And he says the job of a representative is to represent. And since most of my district is non-religious, but we're not counting him as an atheist because he's not publicly said it. So don't quote me on that. Jared didn't use the word atheist. He says non-believer, non-theist, non-religious. But they told us at this last Day of Reason that there are others, and they know each other, and they're just you know, because politics is really, really icky, you know. People can say something about you for the next election. No.
I see a problem with congressmen even to keep their head down because they're atheists.
Yeah.
So we have an image problem. And I think it's caused by atheists like Madeleine O'Hare and Ayn Rand,
Yeah.
those kind of characters. And I think uh, institutions like FFR, and others, atheist organizations should start thinking about how can we improve the reputation or the image of atheists
Yeah.
as because they are seen as evil somehow or vulgar like Madeleine O'Hare or crass and cruel like Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
How do we get rid of that kind of reputation?
Well, education, I guess, is the way to do it. Educating about these atheist songwriters. Who knew, right? Probably a lot of you have sung a lot of the songs. You didn't know what their religious views were, the contributions they've made to the world. And we have a webpage called Freethought of the Day. And if you want, you can subscribe, and every morning we'll give you an email of the birthday that day of somebody. It can be in the arts, it can be in science, it can be philosophy, it can be, you know, politicians or musicians or whatever, authors. Um, we had John Irving, the author, speak at our conference recently, and very happy. And we had Margaret Atwood. I mean, just a whole bunch of.
I'm already required.
Yeah.
I don't need to be briefed.
I know, but yeah, but they're not going to read my books, right? They're not going to come to our meetings, right? So the way to get it is to try to be as public as we can about. And there are atheist characters in movies that you've seen, which helps. Just like with the gay movement, the more people saw more gays coming out, the more normal it became. So the more people come out, and the number of elected officials who are non-believers is growing. There's an organization called ASEO, Association of Secular Elected Officials, at any level, federal, state, school board, county, and that group is growing. And in our convention each year, we have a panel. It's like when we went to Denver, we found local members of the government or legislators who were non-religious who give a panel. So we're trying to educate. Maybe you have some suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And I'm just wondering, what kind of opportunities can we take with the 250th anniversary of the country, and that there's so many people who are wanting separation of church and state, and how do we leverage that?
Boy, that's a problem because you know this administration is going to put a big spin on. They're already putting a big spin. It kind of dampens the enthusiasm, doesn't it? I mean, this is supposed to be a great national party for all of us, but here these people are going to make it into their own Christian
But
national thing.
how do we respond? How do we set it right?
Well, we can complain, of course, like a lot of good that does, but or have our own events, I suppose. But and I guess, yeah, Thomas Paine, yeah,
So many of them.
yeah. He mentioned Thomas Paine. He was Thomas Paine, the forgotten founder, who. And by the way, speaking of Thomas Paine, sorry to deflect there, but we don't actually know what to do. We're kind of wondering what to do ourselves about it. Maybe just ride the storm, and you know. But Thomas Paine, who wrote the book Common Sense, which inspired the troops under Washington, he later he wrote the book The Age of Reason, which was critical of the Bible. He was a deist. He was not an atheist, but because of him not being so Christian, he was kind of forgotten. Just a brilliant man. So Annie Laurie is on the committee, the Thomas Paine Memorial Association. They now have congressional approval to erect a monument to Thomas Paine in D.C. And it's gonna have to be reapproved again. And Jamie Raskin introduced it. Jamie Raskin is always quoting Thomas Paine. If you listen to any of his talks, you know. But we have to raise the money. So that group is raising the money, and I still haven't found a location, but there's a beautiful spot in DC at Pennsylvania and Third with the Capitol in the background. There's this triangle that's not being used for anything in the middle of the street. We think that would be a perfect spot, but I think they call that Area A or something, which needs super duper approval, unlike demolishing the White House to put up a ballroom. Uh, so watch that, and if you want to contribute to that, it's called the Thomas Paine Memorial Association, and we already have the sculptor. Zenas Prodakis is a famous, internationally known sculptor. He's already mocked it up for us, so you can look on our page to see about all that if you're interested in Thomas Paine.
I had a quick question. So getting back to individual experiences, I grew up in a household that had prayer meetings for 30 years, and 5 of my siblings went to Oral Roberts University and all that stuff like that. So I asked my mom about 2 years ago, I said, because she brought it into the house. And I said, when did this whole thing start? Why? She goes, well, so-and-so came to prayer with me and I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. Like it was nothing. And I thought, what? So what do you say? Do you think she just hallucinated or what? What do you say to people like that who have that? I was baptized in the Holy Spirit and this happened. Da, da, da. What? I mean, I think she's freaking nuts. But what do you say when someone says that?
Okay, so I used to say that. So, and for a while I was in the charismatic movement, and I spoke in tongues, and I did like faith healing and all that stuff. And those inner religious experiences that people report, and not everybody has them. I think there's kind of a bell curve of, I don't know what the word would be. I happen to be like a half inch away. Susceptibility to mysticism or weird, that's just my makeup. Others are not that way. Others of you wonder, what the heck are you talking about, right? What's going on? But there's experiences that happen in the mind which are powerful, and they are real. They're actually happening. They're real in the sense, like if you have a nightmare, you're having a real experience, right? It's a real experience. Your heart's beating, your palms. I mean, real things happen in the mind of religious people that are powerful. And if you connect that with a belief in a God, it's so affirming. It just feels like it's so. And even today, as an atheist, I'm not going to do it, so don't worry. I can still speak in tongues. I could still go into that mode, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty neat. If any of you have ever experienced that, I don't know if you were raised in that kind of noisy religion. And it feels like some integrative thing, and like there's a father figure up there that gives you peace. And so she's really feeling something. And it would be wrong for us to deny that and say, you're just making that up, because the brain is doing that. But as real as it is, it doesn't point to anything outside the brain. It's happening in the brain. Very creative and the brain releases chemicals too. Like when you laugh, you get chemicals. And when you have these quote unquote religious experiences, there's also that feeling of euphoria. And you can kind of get hooked on that. It's kind of, and who would want to give that up? So maybe once every couple of years, I'll go out behind the barn and do it. You know, just, and I hope nobody's looking. And it's there. I mean, and so I don't know how to explain why some people do and some people don't. Maybe it's just a randomness in our species that some people tend to be. And so those people that are over here on the curb, they are attracted to those churches. They go, but people over here, they want to go to the Episcopal Church or you know what I mean? They don't want to go to this woo-woo thing. So I guess maybe a good example, if she was interested in even thinking about it, ask when you wake up in the middle of the night with a nightmare, you had a real experience. Nobody can deny that. Your palms are sweating. Maybe you woke up the house. Something very real happened, but there's no boogeyman crawling through the window. You think there is, and your body thinks, but there's not really a boogeyman. You just have a fear that there is. And so this very real experience doesn't have to point to anything outside your own psychology and your own mind. And of course, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how they would put words to what's happening to, but those things happen, and they happen in all religions. Other religions too have tongue speaking and the feeling of the Holy Spirit, and I even got goosebumps. I even thought, whoa, this is amazing. Have any of you ever felt that religiously? Any of that? You're all just a bunch of sinners. So I later learned that goosebumps are not evidence of the Holy Spirit. Goosebumps are evidence of evolution. Do you know that? Why do we get goosebumps? Because our hairy ancestors, there was two reasons why. If it's cold, you have a buffer. You have a thermal buffer. So you seen birds in the winter, they want to. So when it's cold, you bring it up. Or when you're frightened, you want to scare off an attacker. You make yourself look bigger, right? So when do you usually get goosebumps? When you're cold, right? Or when you're afraid, or when you feel like you're in the presence of something. Whoa, goosebumps happen. So it's proof that we evolved from ancestors who were a lot hairier than us. It's not proof of a Holy Spirit. Mhm.
We've got pizza coming in half past. You spent hours yesterday speaking to us in San Francisco. It's up to you how long you want to.
Oh, well, I have to do one more song, so.
Okay. We also.
I have one question. This is my first time to be exposed to this, so I'm not really. I understand that atheism is non-belief in God. So I'm assuming there's other precepts that that atheists have that that I'm not aware of. I guess is what I'm saying. How do we get along with other people? How do we get along with other cultures? That kind of thing. So maybe you can inform me on that.
Yeah, well, atheism really is not saying anything at all. It's just saying what you don't believe. It doesn't say what you do believe. And an atheist is free to form their own opinions without some dogma or tradition telling them what, right? Most atheists that I know, and this is probably not true for all of them, most of them would call themselves humanists. Atheism is the negative side. It's like if you have a bank account that's overdrawn, what atheism does is it brings you up to zero, but it doesn't put any money in the bank. It just gets rid of a debt. It just clears the way, you know what I mean? But then how do you live your life? And most atheists that I know would say they are humanists. And the principles of humanism, accountability and goodness and charity and love and democracy, all those basic values, which are human values, by the way, which are shared by most believers as well, you know. Um, so that's putting money in the bank, coming up with a positive moral philosophy. It could be humanism or some like feminism perhaps, or charity, or something that gets you plugged in and really excited about solving problems and making the world better and finding meaning and purpose. So there is no atheist book about how you need to find meaning. Each of us has to do it on our own, which is kind of cool. That means it's not top down. It means it's bottom up. Each one of us does our own free thinking. And none of us want to be told how we must think or what, Although I do think most of us, everyone in this room, agrees with the principle that to be a moral person, you should act with the intention of minimizing harm, real harm in the world, whatever that is. And harm can be a lot of things. But if you're acting to try to make the world less violent, more peaceful, with less harm and more understanding, then you're a moral person. And how that works out can be different. Maybe one of your siblings dies of some rare disease. You devote your life to fighting that rare disease. You're not going to tell everybody else they have to do what you've chosen to do, but you found something that's going to make the world better. So, and I have a book about it. It's called Life Driven Purpose. And some of you will get the title because Rick Warren's big book is Purpose Driven Life. So it's top down. With Christians, it's a purpose driven life. With us non believers, it's bottom up. It's life driven purpose rather than some commander or slave master telling us what we have to do with our lives. We're free. And as long as you're not hurting people, I'm not going to criticize you. But if your actions are harming, then as I think I'm some kind of a moral person, I will criticize that. I will at least say, hey, you're causing harm. You should stop doing that. So in a sense, a lot of atheists are moralistic, but in that sense of trying to minimize harm, not trying to control your life. Um,
And could you also squeeze in imagine or nothing feels like prayer
yeah. Should I do that?
along with
Okay.
Vatican Rag? Thank you.
Ann Gaylor had a saying, nothing feels like prayer. It was a bumper sticker. It was the one bumper sticker that kept getting ripped off our car. And Annie Laurie asked me to write a song called Nothing Feels Like Prayer. And I said, well, what should it be? It took me like a couple of years. And I finally said, well, Annie Laurie, why don't you just say the words? Just say the phrase. And she said, nothing feels like prayer. I said, say it again. Nothing feels like prayer. And it was, those were the exact tones of her voice that I copied. So there's the song. The farmers pray for precipitation, and then they say, in God we trust. Then along comes a drought and dries the crops out and turns their prayers into dust. The next time they need some assistance, they should take the advice of Mark Twain, who said, it's better to check the weather report before you pray for rain. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer. You reach the final week of the school year, but you haven't studied your best. So you stay up and cram for the final exam. Pray for God's help on the test. You answer the questions with assurance that the Lord will help you sail through. When the results are returned, what have you learned? God's no smarter than you. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer. You ask a supernatural power for sunshine on your wedding day. Then along comes a thunder shower and washes your prayers away. When things go right, you praise the Almighty and you give thanks in Jesus' name. But when things go wrong, you change your song. God never gets the blame. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer. How many centuries will it take us before we realize there are no magic forces in nature, no watchful eyes in the sky? Robert Ingersoll said, a single plow is much more effective than 100 prayers a day. The hands that help are better far than lips that pray. Nothing fails like prayer. Nothing fails like prayer. Use your mind and you will find that nothing fails like prayer. Okay, let's end with Tom Lehrer. That's a fun one. We asked him to be a guest on our radio show a few years ago, and he replied, I love what your group's doing, but I don't do interviews anymore. And of course, he died, was it last year? Just recently he died. Yeah, just a great talent. So first you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and then genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Do whatever steps you want if you have cleared them with the pontiff. Everybody his own Kyrie eleison, doing the Vatican right in line in that processional. Step into that small confessional. They're the guy who's got religion. Tell you if your skin's original. If it is, try playing it safer. Drink the wine and chew the wafer. 2, 4, 6, 8 times transubstantiate. So you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and then genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Make a cross on your abdomen. When in Rome, do like a Roman. Ave Maria, geez, good to see ya. Getting ecstatic and sort of dramatic and doing the Vatican rag.